491. All right.
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I've been so excited about this presentation, and I'm hoping, is that in presentation mode for everybody? Can you give me a thumbs up if it is? Okay, Kathy has given me a thumbs up. So thank you very much for making the time, and Liz, thank you for coordinating this. I would love to just get a sense from all of you of like how many of you have heard about Frog Ferry. And I'm just wondering if there are any specific questions so I can really make sure and hit on that. We don't have a whole lot of time and I've got a lot of ground to cover. So any questions, any thoughts you're really curious about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this actually launching in 2022?
Well, it's ambitious and we're going to talk through it, but you know, I don't take for granted the fact that we put together our plan 4 years ago. We put together the calendar 3.5 years ago, and we are on time. And so that's kind of amazing. And for those of you that may have heard some of the stories that came out of the press conference that we had at Cathedral Park last week, we've had a boat builder step up and offer to design, build, lease to sell us a vessel. So rather than having to come up with about $5 million for the vessel, they've already invested about $50,000 in the design, and there's still some more design work that needs to be done. And it takes about 9 months to build a vessel. So that's the time frame we're up against. So really transparent about it. I think if it happens, it's more likely it'll be in the fall. But we actually have a community up in Washington State that's saying, we've got the design funds, we need a vessel for 3 months. So why don't we design it for you, get it underway?
For some reason, I'm not hearing anything at the moment. Is anybody else having this issue?
I'm not hearing anything.
You're not
Yeah, she just cut out.
Yeah, I think Susan, you might have been frozen for a minute. It just went silent. So whatever the last thing you said is, you might want to repeat that. And then I have to let somebody in from the waiting room.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I was just saying, so it is an ambitious schedule, but we're feeling pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to put a vessel on the water in fall of 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and click through this pretty quickly. And I start off with this little awkward slide of myself because people wonder who is this woman and why is she doing this? And I do have going on 35 years of experience in transportation infrastructure and economic development here in Oregon. And I got my start with the governor's office and Business Oregon, and I was a co-founder of Cycle Oregon. And for those of you that are cyclists and you know about kind of that culture that's really developed here, believe it or not, 35 years ago, people didn't cycle around the community or around the state much. And so we were just lacking really the infrastructure around that and the culture, and the ferry service is very reminiscent of that. I spent 10 years as a director with the Port of Portland and led the corporate communications aspect of it. So that's really where a lot of my understanding of the river system and the importance of being a river city comes from. And then I spent some time with Greater Portland Inc. and Travel Portland, and then 5 years with Erickson, which is a 50-year-old helicopter company. The headquarters is in Portland, but the operations are based out of the Medford area and Central Point. Both a manufacturer and an operator. So I got some really good experience in operations there, and they really specialize in catastrophic response. So to major wildland fires, to major earthquakes, to hurricanes coming through and wiping out power supplies or water supplies. And so I learned a lot there. And then I'm a student pilot, and that's really where this initiative for me anyway came from, was flying overhead. You really get a unique sense of the topography of the region, and flying up to the Puget Sound area and the San Juans and seeing the ferry service. And so I was just curious about it, started doing a little research just as a resident, like any one of you could have done, and then realized, oh, you know, ferries have come a long way. They've really evolved in terms of the technology. And it's why so many river cities are actually expanding their ferry services. we just effectively believe that we need to have as many choices as possible that are also affordable and sustainable to meet our transit need. And when you have a natural riverway, transit way flowing through the middle of your downtown core, it's a natural for you to consider using it, particularly when you don't have the capital infrastructure cost for a river, where really the cost for most transit when it comes to roads and rails are really in creating that pathway. It's not so much running a bus or a train, it's the infrastructure. And so really for us, it's the equivalent of building out bus shelters, if you will, are really the docks, and then building out the vessels, which are akin to a bus. And we really wanted to make sure that our transportation system has a focus on social and climate equity, especially when so many of the federal dollars coming down are earmarked for road infrastructure. And I just, personally think that's wrong when we really need to be reducing greenhouse gas emissions and getting people out of their single occupancy vehicles. So very quickly on the timeline, but this slide is actually really important to just ground you in where we've been and where we're going. So started over 4 years ago, I sat down one Saturday, did a bunch of research, put together a plan, took it out to the key transit agencies. Stephanie mentioned PBOT. I work with PBOT a lot, ODOT, TriMet, and Metro in particular. And they all agreed, hey, we should be considering the river, but we don't have the expertise and we don't have the capacity for it. So I said, so from my count, it's looking like we're investing about $12 billion a year in transportation, and yet we're not looking at best practices and proven best practices. I just think that's wrong. And I get it that you guys are super busy, but just continuing to invest in the sunk costs of our current infrastructure and building out more roadways, I just think is not very strategic. So they said, why don't you go ahead and do this and we'll help you out. And it took me a while to get on board with that because I was not in the mindset of starting this, but I actually got so excited with every meeting I had, especially with other ferry operators in Seattle and San Francisco, and candidly across the nation and the globe, saying, we love Portland, we want to help out. And candidly, all of the research just continued to prove out that this was really viable for the Portland area. And if you look over on the right-hand column, you'll see in yellow delivered studies. And so the public transit agency said, before you can do anything, you have to go raise the funds for and conduct these studies. So all of these are posted out on our website. We raised the funding for it, and I think it's about $700,000 worth. So we did it actually at a very low cost in relation to what the agencies, because they've talked about doing these studies in the past, but they've never funded it or engaged with it. So we actually did it for a pretty low cost. And all these studies have been done. They clearly say this is feasible. Those public transit agencies have all validated our assumptions. They've validated our findings. They've said there's a great deal of rigor here. They've really applauded our efforts. And candidly, we really appreciate their coming to the table to help us frame this up. So this is not like Frog Ferry going off on their own and saying, this is where we think stops should be. It's very much been in concert with these, the public transit agencies. And so if you look at the bottom of the right-hand column there, where it's outlining really our goals for 2020 and 2021, we delivered that operational feasibility study and finance plan last fall. And that was really a big check the box. We can move forward. And then the next goal was securing a public agency sponsor for federal funding. And so we're all hearing about this big, over $3 trillion infrastructure package. There's quite a bit of money in the FTA budget for passenger ferries, and PBOT agreed to sponsor our application for federal funding. We as a little nonprofit can't directly apply. So that was a really major threshold for us. And then really this next goal is building out a pilot project proof of concept. So I've just taken you through really the left-hand column of where we've been. A lot of outreach was included in there, over 2,500 meetings at least. So we've done a lot of outreach, and If any of you have other groups you would like us to come present to, we would love to do that, particularly there in St. John's and Cathedral Park, because you're so integral to the work we're doing now. And then you can see we're really at the start of the pilot project, proof of concept here. And the mission is from the Cathedral Park dock, an existing dock that will need some enhancements there. And I'll take you through that in just a minute, down to River Place, which also has an existing dock. So we're really trying to run this one vessel, 70 passenger vessel, really focusing on commuters, but we'll take non-commuters as well, to learn from. It's really a test. That's what a pilot project is. Beginning in summer to fall of 2022 through 2024. And then that would take us into phase 3, which is an onward operation, up to 7 vessels and 9 stops. And the reason for that is really spelled out in the operational feasibility study, but much of that is about that access and the schedule for passengers, where for some stops based on the demand, they want like an hourly service. For some other stops, and it's every half an hour. So that's how we came up with a number of ferries for our projection. I really want to call out, the intention has always been for this to be a public passenger ferry service. So yeah, this would be way easier if we took venture capital money and we could just move forward really quickly, but the ticket prices would be beyond reach for a lot of people. So the ethos has always been, we're trying to do what the public agencies aren't doing. And this is passenger only. So a lot of people in Portland have been up on the Washington State ferries, which has cars. We don't have cars. The whole idea behind this is to try to come up with a means for people to be able to leave their car behind. So we're really trying to mitigate the need for a lot of parking. I'm not going to take you through all of the objectives here, but I just want to call out the Frog is based on the Chinookan mythology. And Frog is credited with teaching the local people how to fish by going down to the riverbanks and collecting nettles to create nets. And so the logo of Frog, and the original Frog's right there, was created by the chair of the Chinook Nation, Tony Johnson, and I got to work with him on an installation out at the Port of Portland building. So he gave that to me 14 years ago, and I've just loved it and loved the story behind it. And so I just one day called him and said, can I use Frog for the logo? We got to call the ferry something. So that's where that came from. He's then made the introduction to the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So we really think there's a wonderful opportunity to talk about our Indigenous past here, going, way before Portland was officially cultivated back to 30,000 years ago, when the Native peoples were here and plying our rivers by their canoes. And ultimately, this is not about connecting people from point A to point B. I mean, there is kind of a binary perspective of that's the value proposition. But for me, the higher calling here is as a river city for people to really better appreciate and honor the river that's here. We often refer to ourselves as the bridge city. From a land use planning perspective, the river is something to get around or over, but actually very few people are able to get out to the river and really appreciate the wildlife and this natural wonder. We do know that commuter ferries are a proven worldwide concept. Of the top 80 river cities in the world, all of them use their waterways for transit. Of the river cities in the United States, there are only 4 cities that don't use their waterways for transit, and Portland is one of them. And we know, and especially there in the St. John's community, you guys are very familiar with, how hamstrung you are for transit options. This is just a cross section of some of the Chinookan art, past and present, that we can tap into, that I think is amazingly evocative. Adam McIsaac is the resident artist for the Chinook tribe. And so we're so grateful to he and Tony for allowing us to use their artwork. And we really want to bring that to signage and be able to use native names for the ferry stops as well. This is a little animated map of the proposed 9 stops. And again, I want to say we're not precious about the stops. You know, it's not me. Every day people are like, oh, I wish you put a stop here because my daughter-in-law lives there and works here. And it's like, this is really grounded in the transit grid throughout our region and where there is demand and where we either have really good connectivity to the rest of the transit grid or where there are opportunities. And so what I mean by that is we got to get people to and from the docks. That's really key. And you'll see if you do go check out our operational feasibility study online, that we map out those connections for each stop. So we're talking with Kyle, who runs the bike hub under the aerial tram at OHSU, has expressed interest in having that sort of bike hub there at Cathedral Park as well. Do we bring in e-bikes and expand Bike Town? And that's part of the conversation with PBOT. We're really aware of how heavily used that boat ramp is by recreational boaters. We don't want to impede their use of that either. And for these stops here, it's, you know, relatively easy for us to come and bring a boat in, but really what's the key for a ferry service is who the landside owner is. So in the ferry space, you say, you know, he or she that has the dock is king. So working with a landside partner or jurisdiction, so if it's the city of Lake Oswego or OMSI, you know, as an organization, they really have to want us and be a partner in this. So we don't go out and kind of push ourselves in and say, we want to go there. It's really something we're working hand in hand with. And that's why it's so important for us to work closely with the neighborhoods here of St. John's and Cathedral Park and really do this the right way, as well as we've been working with the Downtown Association that includes River Place. I'm going to show you a new vessel that I just haven't dropped in here on the next slide, but this gives you a sense of, it's called a low air draft. So it has a very low profile for clearance under our bridges, which is a key issue here. It's very stable, double hold catamaran. Yes, there's bike storage for 12 bikes. We plan to go fully electrified. And again, the ferry industry is evolving very quickly. And if you go on our social media sites, we're showing different prototypes as well as current services around the world. And it's, I mean, for those of you around my age, I just turned 56. It kind of reminds me of the Jetsons, where it's like, it almost looks like aircraft on the water that's out there. So, I mean, the future is here today. It's going to take us a little time to get the shoreside charging infrastructure in to these sites. So for the pilot project, we plan on running, it's a traditional diesel engine, but the big difference is we'll be running renewable diesel as the fuel source, which is 80% cleaner than traditional diesel. So much better for the human body than biodiesel is R99. And then you can see over on the right-hand column, it would be one vessel, 70 passengers, operating 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. And the ticket price is going to be $2. Actually, I need to change this and it's kind of locked in here. I couldn't do it. But for honored citizens, low cost would be $2. And then we want kids to ride for free. So this is a pretty vessel that's been designed for us. And there are a lot more photos and visuals and interiors on our website for you to take a look at. But just to give you a sense, this has been designed specifically for the Willamette River, our low wake, ultra low wake and no wake requirements, as well as for river debris, which is obviously a really big issue for us here. So our target audience really are commuters, followed by locals that we would like for them to come on board, crisscross the river, bring their families, visitors, obviously, and then for first responders in the event of a major earthquake or catastrophe. Lots and lots of outreach for supporters and stakeholders. If any of you as individuals or as the Boosters Association, if you would like to write a letter of support to put on our website, we would love to have it. There's no pressure, but we have over 100 letters of support. And we really don't have a detractor that we know of today against the ferry service. So I take a great deal of pride in that. I also am not braggadocious about it because I'm kind of waiting for someone to say, I hate this idea. But we've been so focused on outreach and this grassroots effort that really, it's helping to inform in a really honest way our approach and our operation, that I think that's part of why we've done as well as we have. And then we have 9 volunteer teams. And I got to tell you, we've got the cream of the crop. We have the most extraordinary group of civically minded individuals. And I always think for boosters, they're our people here. And we just had our event last Tuesday down at Cathedral Park, and we had 65 of our supporters there for the press conference. Here are 4 of the committees. So maritime operations, a lot of these folks are actually out of the Seattle market. We had 4 leaders in the out of the Seattle ferry industry come down. We've had, I think last time pre-COVID, it was 5 of them came down. I mean, all pro bono, all on their own dime, learning Portland and helping us. It's just been so rewarding. Strategy and public affairs, the engineering team, our public agency partners we work with. And then you'll see some names here in green, and those are our board members. So they're all working board members. I'm a board member as well. There are 8 of us. So Scott South, he's actually our former chair. He's a business leader from Vancouver. Dan Bowers, the executive director of Portland Streetcar. So he's actually with the city of Portland, provided really great guidance to us. James Paulson is our current board chair, and he actually grew up in Northeast Portland. He now lives on the South Waterfront. He has an extensive HR background. Charlene Zidell, you may know the Zidell name, and they own the property down in the South Waterfront. A lot of our private sector providers, marketing and communications. And we just brought in, and there's a brand new chair there, Amy Snyder, who's just doing a phenomenal job for us, as that's really kicking in gear. And then customer experience is a brand new committee, just had its first meeting. So as we're really looking at access and communications and language and ticketing and digital access. And then I'm going to leap over to just the highlights of our operational feasibility study, in case you don't want to go in and read the 130 pages with I think it's like 12 appendices. It's actually kind of a fun read if you like to geek out on transportation. But for 7 vessels, for 9 docks, the total capital cost is $40 million, which as a taxpayer, sounds like so much money. When it comes to transportation infrastructure, it's a tiny, 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 tiny amount. So usually there's a B for billions after that number rather than an M. Operating costs, $6.8 million. You can see the ticket revenue, our annual subsidy request, which would be the equivalent of covering 45% of the costs. That's a pretty high number and really is the reflection of a very efficient operation. Pre-COVID, the subsidy for TriMet was 84% of a subsidy. So you go out and buy a $2.50 ticket on TriMet, that subsidy is $17.50. So just, TriMet's really important to us and for that connectivity, but I just think it's really important for people to understand that largely, the subsidy is really high. And we typically, when we're buying a pass or ticket, we don't understand how high that subsidy is because transportation is expensive. The ferry, relatively speaking, is less than 1/3 of that subsidy. So if people that don't know and kind of go, oh my gosh, ferries, it's going to be way too expensive, there's no way. And it's like, actually, let's operate with facts and data. That's all we're asking. And we'll do the comparison. We're not trying to judge good or bad, but let's just really be steeped in the data. And then looking at the average ticket price, because when we include Vancouver in, that is 15.5 nautical miles. That's a 45-minute journey. That ticket price is probably going to be more like $6 to $6.50 each way. But still, if you're coming into Portland and you're paying for parking and operating that vehicle and all, the net savings is still pretty substantial. And I'm not going to take a whole lot of time on this, but just looking at the throughput for the electrification of ferries, particularly for like businesses that have a lot of engineers on their team, they really like to see what the ultimate power source is. And even for the R99, we're looking at really clean sources behind it. And then for the pilot project, which really comes down to your neighborhood, would be largely targeting really OHSU employees and patients and staff, and PSU students and staff. For OHSU in St. John's and Cathedral Park, there are 500 employees. About 300 of them are commuting to OHSU Monday through Friday, every day. And that's a number coming from OHSU. For PSU, it's about 400 faculty and students. PSU is actually our largest transportation hub in the state of Oregon of 26,000. So again, this is open. If you're a commuter to downtown Portland and just want to take the ferry, it's absolutely open to you as well. But just what's providing us some guidance of kind of a target market, that's kind of where our focus is. And this is 6.5 nautical miles. So I you know, the why I think is fairly self-explanatory. Our travel time is 25 minutes as opposed to right now in current transit, it's about an hour. We just did focus groups with a number of individuals out of Cathedral Park and St. John's on Friday or Monday. If any of you want to be involved in any way, even if it's to say, Susan, I just want to be on your mailing list and then later decide whether or not I want to join a committee, that's perfectly fine too. But I just really am hoping you come away with this with a sense of our intention to really reach out to the community and do this the right way. And then here is your boat launch there. And you can see there's the north and the south. So again, this is a boat launch that's located north of the St. John's Bridge. You can kind of see the shadow of the bridge there. And this would be a temporary site for the pilot project. What we'd really love to do is have our long-term dock be at Green Acres. And Green Acres, we've been working with Matt, Mark, and Tim there, and kind of tracking on their progress there. We also have a plan B that would be a little bit further south, coming off the Cathedral Park period. But we're focused on this dock. It's owned by Portland Parks. The Oregon State Marine Board has some money into it. This dock needs to be stabilized. It's not great. We would need to add some hand railings. And then there for E is where we would put in, it's a temporary, it's called a flexi float dock. That's about 10 feet by about 40 feet. And they're spuds. So they don't actually go into the riverbed. It's actually their weight that holds it there. And so our intention is to go in, get this federal funding, make that dock that much better, share this space, keep our passengers off on the south side of this, so we're not impeding the recreational boaters. And then in 2 years, we leave a better dock behind for the community and boaters. And then this is the existing dock down at River Place. So that's the old Newport Bay restaurant. So if you guys can kind of imagine that marina down there at River Place. And really at this point, we don't think we need to do a whole lot for that dock. We just got the engineering documents from the city of Portland on it. So we're taking a look at it. We might need to put in a railing, but candidly, there are 2 boats there that they call them ghost boats. So it's contributing to a lot of the crime in the area. So the neighbors there would really love to have more foot traffic coming through there. And you're not supposed to have overnight moorage there. And those vessels have been there for the past 2 years. So that is my presentation. I know I talk really fast, but I really love to make sure we have time for questions and answers. So fire away.
I have a quick question for you, Susan, and we do have our next speaker here, so we do have to be mindful of time. So I'm hoping you can put your email in the chat too, so that people can email you directly. But we're working on a district map, which we're hoping to print in fall of this year. And we wanted to, this actually came from Christine. She wanted to know, should we put Frog Ferry on the map?
Well, let's look at the timetable. It might be next year, because we're not going to physically have a location there for the next year. But yeah, please keep us in mind. And I would just love, maybe Liz, you're my conduit on this just in general, but it's like, caterers, who should we call? We're calling around and, as we're coming out of COVID. And so like getting, we really want to source coffees. I know I'm going a little bit off script here, but like we really had to do some calling just to get like treats and coffee and, beverages for last for last week. And I'm trying to think, there was another service we really need. And it's just, you know,
Yeah.
we just love to know that. And I've met the owner of Two Rivers Bookstore through another, like a mayor's task force working on kind of the recovery of the area. And she's lovely. But the more I can kind of learn that, even for like, you know, meals and dinners, because candidly, we're there so much. But like for the last year and a half, we go through the Burgerville, you know, because that's what's been open. As we're there. So I know it kind of sounds silly, but we'd like to figure out how we can become more integrated with the community, and with all of you as business leaders, you can kind of help us do that.
We can definitely help you with that. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, you know, of course, as a business district and wanting to bring people to, you know, experience all the different businesses we have, something that's top of mind for me always when we talk about Frog Ferry is how do we get people from the ferry up to the district if they, you know, if it's a non-car ferry and you're coming from downtown to Cathedral Park, how do you get up to the business district? Nobody wants to walk up Baltimore, I guarantee it.
Well, I would love for your group to be in touch with Jennifer Vitalio. And I don't know if you all know Jennifer, but she's the past chair of the Cathedral Park Neighborhood Association. She spoke at our press conference last week, and she is working on putting together, she calls it a trolley. So I don't know exactly what that looks like. We consider it a shuttle, but again, because we don't want people driving and a lot of car traffic. So she said it's something that's been considered for 10 to 12 years through the community. So that's exactly what it is. I just sent her a grant opportunity for the trolley yesterday.
Right.
So that's the short answer for that. But we're looking at, you know, bike town and scooters and a lot of different means for people to get up that little hill.
Okay.
I have one question real quick. Can you expand on what your plan B would be for the dock if you can't get into Cathedral Park or Green Acres?
Yeah, actually, I'm happy to show you, Maria, if you want to email me at my email address, I can send you what that looks like. But we do have a design for a dock. That's the plan B, and it would be a new dock. So we'd need to go through the certification, you know, effort. And of course, with the super fund and all, I've got a meeting with 10 state and federal agencies this afternoon. And so we're really paying attention to that. And, you know, as they'll be working on their findings this fall and winter in terms of the sediment there around the area. But it would be a new dock down there in that area. And again, the feds pay for 80% of infrastructure, which is really high. Most transit projects are 50-50 match. So just knowing that's out there, and we're an excellent fit, and our congressional delegation has a lot of clout now. And with Congressman DeFazio chairing transportation infrastructure, we're feeling pretty bullish about funding, particularly because Oregon doesn't traditionally tap into that ferry funding. So, you know, but the support of your community makes a huge difference for those infrastructure needs. But really great question, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. I'm actually going to stop the recording right now. So thank you for that.